Hello and welcome to the GreenStream, a podcast brought to you by Sustainable Business Network Detroit, a network of partnerships between Southeast Michigan stakeholders, innovators, and changemakers. Each partner is on a mission to advance and amplify sustainable business practices, and we're here to learn from, share, and help activate a sustainable way forward for Greater Detroit. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review and join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And head over to our website, sbn-detroit.org. Now, let's listen in to our conversation with today's sustainability leaders.
Well, hello and welcome to the GreenStream. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Terry Barclay, President and CEO of Inforum and Chair of the Sustainable Business Network of Detroit. And I'm absolutely excited that joining us today is councilperson Scott Benson from District 3 in the city of Detroit. And he's also the energy behind the Green Task Force. And we're going to be hearing more about that today. So, Scott, could you start out? You have such a fascinating background. Could you take a minute to tell us a little bit about your story and how you came to the work that you're doing today?
Oh, sure. So number one, Terry, thank you for this opportunity to talk about sustainability and just introduce myself. Once again, Councilman Scott Benson, City of Detroit, 3rd District, Northeast side of Detroit. And so I got to City Council as a direct result of going away to war in 2008. When I left my neighborhood, it was in a certain condition. When I came back, it was in even worse condition. And so I said, I can talk and complain, or I can do something. So I got off the sideline, and my life mission is about service. So military, nonprofit, and now government. And I ran for office, and I was blessed enough to be selected by the residents of the 3rd District to represent them on Detroit City Council in the first year, in the first term since the early 1900s that the city of Detroit went back to districts. And so I represent the Northeast side. I've always been a huge advocate for sustainability and the environment. And this just gives me a great platform to help set policy and guide the city of Detroit in this direction. And so I lead what is the Detroit Green Task Force. And that's made up of a number of advocates, practitioners, government officials, business leaders, all looking to forward policies around sustainability. And our goal is to make Detroit the most sustainable green city in the United States. And we continue to work towards that. So hopefully that helps with a little background.
It absolutely helps. And that is absolutely aligned with what we're trying to do with the Sustainable Business Network of Detroit. So we want to amplify and spread the word about the great things that you're up to with the task force in any way that we can.
That's great.
Could you share in a little bit more detail about how you view sustainability from the perspective of the work that you're doing in District 3?
Mm-hmm. So great question. So for me, it's about how do we reduce the cost of your home ownership? Can we reduce your energy costs and making it more sustainable? Can we reduce your solid waste fee by shifting from solid waste, your traditional garbage, into more recycling? What can we do to ensure that there's more infrastructure around EVs? What can we do to ensure that our city buildings are more sustainable, that we're reducing our greenhouse gas footprint? Because typically what you see is that when you talk to residents of Detroit or just your common person, they typically think that sustainability is going to be a suburban soccer mom type thing. It's about throwing away bottles. It's about making sure that you have your Prius, when in our reality, in the city of Detroit, that's just not the common lifestyle, nor is it within the economic reality of many of our residents. And so for me, it's really about how do we leverage sustainability to help reduce your burden, how reduce your economic burden, And so if I can identify how you can save energy, if I can identify other ways to reduce your energy costs, to make your house more sustainable, to make your lifestyle more sustainable and help reduce the cost, then you'll get more people buying in. And so recently we're talking about now. It was my office and through the Green Task Force that we're able to really bring curbside recycling full force into the city of Detroit. We're now talking about composting within the city of Detroit. We got a couple of years ago, but we're working on that. The Office of Sustainability was something that we advocated for, and we now have, and we're on now our third director of the Office of Sustainability. And pretty soon the city is going to be, and I'm going to keep this in air quotes and hopefully my fingers crossed, that we're going to be implementing and developing a number of solar farms where we're going to be able to take the city to almost a net zero when it comes to our energy use at our buildings. And so we're going to be the mayor and the administration is looking to partner with some developers to build solar farms, and where the city then exchange that energy for free electricity for our buildings, and we'll be going green. And we have a greenhouse gas ordinance which mandates that we have a certain level by the year 2050, and we're looking at, I think it's a 70 or 30% reduction by the year 2030, and we're going to hit that plus if we're able to get these solar farms going. So things of that nature. That's how I view sustainability in the third district and how it supports all of our residents and not just what people would think would be the downtown residents, your sexy neighborhoods, but everybody, how everybody can benefit from sustainability and help drive down your cost and reduce your energy burden. Does that help?
Oh, it helps tremendously. And I just want to applaud you for your emphasis on cost reduction. You know, one of the big things that we hear at SBND, especially with small business owners, you know, not the big companies, but you know, people from the neighborhoods who are running businesses, when you mention sustainability, they immediately see dollar signs. They see it as an expense, not as a savings. And so it's so refreshing to learn about your focus on managing those expenses and connecting sustainable choices to cost reductions. One of the questions that I have, the other thing that we often hear, and I wonder what your view is of this, is this to get to that point of cost reductions, it feels like it's going to take a long time. What can you say about how quickly residents might see and feel the impact?
Oh, cost reduction. So reducing your energy burden. So number one, we have grants for our low-income families that will provide you with a new roof. So we're helping with your sustainability there. We have grants that provide you with new windows, helping your sustainability there. And so what we're looking to do is really just drive down your energy burden. Because I got to go back to the message. If you talk to one of my residents and I start talking about sustainability, what they're immediately going to think about are white soccer moms in the suburbs. And I've got to change that narrative. And now, as the chair of the Green Task Force, we've now been on 3 site visits: San Francisco, Minneapolis, and Seattle. And in San Francisco, they have a very robust sustainability office. They've got over 100 employees, something similar to what we have for our Detroit Economic Growth Corporation. They've got that just for sustainability. And they had messaging in, I think, 18 different languages, all the major languages that are there in San Francisco. They had their Green Corps, which have their public housing areas where people will go and help in San Francisco. Their solid waste is picked up by Peace. And so if you can reduce somebody's solid waste weekly, then you can reduce their bill. You can say, hey, you can recycle this and that doesn't cost you anything, whereas your trash costs you money. So let's look at how we can do that. And they were doing that in public housing. And typically public housing is not where you find a large bastion of sustainability advocates. And so the city found that this is a great way to help encourage recycling, reduce solid waste, and help people save money. So doing things like that, really bringing sustainability down to the common person, and not just about recycling. So it's reduce, reuse, and recycle is our hierarchy and how we suggest that people look at it. And these are things that people have been doing for a long time. It just wasn't cool and it didn't have a name of sustainability. And so when you were reusing your older cousin's tough skin jeans,
Yeah.
because that was a way to reduce and reuse, when your mother said, hey, we're going to reuse this jelly jar as a glass, that's a way to reduce and reuse. So we're also implementing just old common sense remedies as well to reduce your carbon footprint, to improve your sustainability footprint, and to help save you some money.
Yeah. What great examples. It really is true that we should have followed our grandparents and our parents' examples of things so often.
Some of us still are, and we don't even know it. So
it's really true. So tell us, if you can, could you share a little bit about how the Green Task Force does its work? I know there are a number of committees, and you have local nonprofit organizations, environmental organizations, businesses involved in those. How do you get things done?
So, and this was when I started this job, former councilman King Cockrell said, Scott, I believe that you would take this and run with it. And he was right. So we got the green. So I started working with the Green Task Force with the members at the time, and we just started working. And what I saw was I just didn't think that we were going far enough, and that we had the vision to move the Green Task Force in the city forward. So for me, it became I've got to move the city forward. We've got to become more sustainable. Just because we live in Detroit and people look at the Midwest as this being the Rust Belt, that's not true. There are a number of municipalities and cities around throughout the Midwest that are really doing some progressive. They've implemented progressive policies. They're really doing some really forward-thinking things around sustainability. So I wanted Detroit to be in that sphere. So when you think about Minneapolis, they've got a really great sustainability office there. When you think about Ann Arbor, I wanted Detroit to bubble up there. So working with our practitioners and working with our advocates, and this is one of the things, our advocates and practitioners, this is their lifestyle. This is not just what they do because it's cool and it's nice. They have been about this. This is their lifestyle. I've got many members of the Green Task Force who have been doing this for 30 or 40 years. And so they're really passionate about this. But now that the business community has bought in, and now that you see your elected officials and your government officials buying in, it makes the job so much easier. So instead of having to row upstream against all the naysayers, you're now seeing that you got a wind at your back in sales and people jumping on board saying, hey, let's go. So now we got the administration who works with our advocates. And to get to the point where the city is going to be able to put these solar farms in, they have come over to the Green Task Force to ask us and our experts in solar for help when it comes to educating our residents. How does this work? Because the residents have to buy in. And so if we don't have the community buy-in, we're not going to have the solar farms. And so you've got my practitioners, you've got my professionals who are helping people understand this and working with the community and supporting the government in this initiative, because it's going to take the resources the government can bring to the table to get to this point, and the fact that we have an ordinance, which means we have a city law that mandates the city reduces greenhouse gas. This is one of the ways to do it. It also helps that you have a mayor who's willing to lean in and has staff who are smart enough to go around the country and find the best practices and the best consultants to help us think through this. I mean, my Green Task Force is great, but I'm a legislator. And so I can't do it. I can tell people to do it. It takes the executive branch to actually do. And so having everybody rowing in the same direction, it makes things so much better. And then having the advocates from the Green Task Force who are advocating, the practitioners who do this for a living, the business leaders who are buying in, and the policymakers all at the same table. So it's just a great process and a great group to help make this happen.
It sounds like collaboration. You've really are generating an environment of collaboration around this.
And so what's interesting, so my senior policy analyst, Kern Wimberly, he's also the director of the Green Task Force. And so he was recently acknowledged when he went to a conference in Minneapolis for what we have here as our Green Task Force, typically you'll have the environmental advocates on one side, and there'll be echo chamber there. And you'll have the business leaders on one side, and there'll be an echo chamber there. What I've done, this was on purposefully, to have all of the business leaders, the advocates, the practitioners at the same table so we can talk and move the community and the city forward. Now, what that means is that not everybody's voice fits at that table, because some are not going to be willing to listen to others, and some just don't want that message. I need people, and as you said, I need collaborators, people who are willing to work together. Doesn't mean that you have to give up what you believe in, but I need you prepared to say, we're working on behalf of the city to move this forward. There are compromises, and people learn from each other, but we've put together a very robust group, which now the administration relies upon for our expertise, which is something you don't see in government typically, where you have an outside group, very ad hoc group, basically informal, although I formalized it, but working directly with the administration to implement policies that we're suggesting. And so Curran was recognized for that in Minneapolis a couple of years ago. So it's very exciting to have other people recognize my team for what we're doing here in the city of Detroit, which is special.
How refreshing to hear about the recognition of having that focus on coming together, as opposed to being on opposite sides and yelling at one another. It seems like it's really, and I loved your description of being intentional in how you go about putting that together. Kudos to you. Could you talk a little bit too about some of the work that you did in the neighborhood enterprise zone homesteads and what that means for sustainable growth in the city?
Sure. So when we're looking at our neighborhoods and how we leverage some of these tools, it's critical to think about number one, property ownership, and then number two, what resources the city can bring to bear around those items. And so we're looking at the neighborhood enterprise zones, and they take on many forms and have many names, is that there are federal resources that actually can be brought to bear there. And so we're looking at how we can do that. And I can't say that we've specifically seen any fruit as of yet, but hopefully we're putting the seeds in the ground now to help make Detroit more sustainable when it comes to bringing those type of federal resources to our neighborhoods when it comes to sustainability.
Yeah, interesting. So I'm dying to ask you what you'd like to see more of. What more needs to be happening in terms of sustainability in the city of Detroit? You know, you've laid forth a really bold and great vision, comprehensive vision. But what more do we need to do?
So, Terry, we got a long way to go, but we've come a long way. So I don't want to negate the fact that Detroit has come a long way, but I also don't want to rest on our laurels. We have a long way to go. My goal is still to get that blue ribbon as a blue ribbon sustainable green city in the United States, and we're not there just yet. So we need, number one, this is what I just had approved in our latest budget, a $1.2 million line item for capital investment when it comes to level 3 chargers for the city of Detroit. And so we have a few. You'll have some at Myers along 8 Mile. You'll have a few. I think we have a couple at Beacon Park. We don't have them throughout the city. And if we're going to lean into electrification, we're going to have to have this type of infrastructure. So we got 1.2 million, which will purchase about 3 level 3 charging stations, which are 4 chargers at a station. They're about $400,000 each. That will also allow us to leverage state dollars, which are coming down the pike, and it'll leverage some other capital that we as a city. So we're going to electrify more of a pilot, the executive parking lot at KMAC. And so your judges, your elected officials, they'll all start to see what it means to have the ability to charge their cars at work, which then also gives you buy-in. So for me, we've got to really lean into our electric infrastructure, and it's very expensive. And so when I'm talking $400,000 for a um, prong charging station, I mean, those aren't pennies. And there's a huge cost when it comes to just getting enough energy to those stations as well. So we got to work with DTE, and we are now, and we got to make sure that we have the best practice. So where do we locate these? So we're talking to private property owners. We're looking at our own city-owned property. So when it comes to recreation centers, when it comes to police stations, because for me, many of our neighborhoods, there is a perception or there is a perception that Detroit is a high crime area, real or perceived. There is crime in the city, not going to deny that. But I also want to make it so that if you're coming home from work and you're in your EV, that you can stop somewhere and you don't have an electric charger at home or level 3, that, hey, stop at the police station. You'll feel comfortable and safe going there. Stop in front of the fire station, or stop at the Myers on 8 Mile, or Belmont Shopping Center on 8 Mile, or the Aldi's on 8 Mile. These are locations where people will feel safe. It will also bring people into Detroit. If you're traveling through the state of Michigan, you say, hey, there is a level 3 charger right off the highway at the city airport, at the 9th precinct. So you would stop there and charge your vehicle. This past weekend, I had the chance to take my family to the Nature Center on Belle Isle, which is an extension of the Detroit Zoo, which is owned by the city of Detroit still. And they had 2 level 3 chargers there. And so I have a plug-in hybrid, and this is I call myself Mr. Environmental, but I still have much to learn because I pulled my Jeep Grand Cherokee, which is made in the city of Detroit, a plug-in hybrid, but it can't take a level 3 charger. I didn't realize that. So I pulled up, I'm going to charge my vehicle right here. Nope, not going to do that, Scott. But there was a Chevy Volt that was there. There was a Volvo that was there, and they were just happily charging their vehicles on Belle Isle on city property in a very safe and convenient environment. And so that's what we want to bring. So we got to increase the electrification. We also have to really get the information and a culture shift. So we just have to shift paradigms within the city of Detroit when it comes to environment. That's education. And people often say, oh, environment, we're just going to put them some new windows. I'm going to get myself a new roof and we'll electrify some cars. No, you got to educate people as well. Because if you don't get in the buy-in, you'll have a bunch of very high-priced coat hangers or places where people will lean their bicycle versus pulling their car up and actually charging. So we got to get that education out. And I'm a firm believer that an educated public will buy in and understand the benefits to themselves and to society. And we got to think this is not just about us. This is also about posterity. And so it's for my son, it's for my nieces, it's for those who are coming after us and the residents we want to bring to the city of Detroit. And so this is one of the things that young people want to see when they choose a city in which to live. And so can I use public transit to get around? Is that a viable option? And public transit, I'm a firm believer in this, should not be the transit of last resort. And in Detroit, for too long, it's been the transit of last resort. So what can we do to have sustainable regional transit? I'm not sure if you've been to Seattle lately. They've got electric buses that once they come from the suburbs and hit the city, the rails come up and their wheels drop down and they become gas buses. And so they're hybrids. So it changes how things work there, and they've been able to figure out a way to mix both modes. Bus rapid transit, we don't have that yet. We do have the Q line, and that's a great pilot, but that's something that has to be extended, and we have to get serious about it. I have a program that's called B for E, which is Bicycles for Employees, and for me, the cost of a car for economically challenged and or young people is too high. So if you live within 5 miles of work, we are working on a way, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we're going to get $1 million grant from the United Way, where we will be implementing and scaling up a way for employers to pay for employees to have bicycles, i.e., would be a deduction from your job or part of your benefit package, that you would ride your bike to work. You wouldn't have to worry about a car. You can ride your bike to work, and people all over the world ride year round. In Scandinavian countries, they ride year round. In Europe, they ride year round. If you go to New York, Chicago, people are riding year round. So it's a paradigm shift again, but it's also removing cars from the road. It's helping people save money, and it's making them healthy as well. I'm a big advocate for cycling, if you weren't aware. But these are some of the things that we need to do, and we're seeing buy-in. And so I was the first one to really focus and advocate on bike lanes around the city. And you're seeing that infrastructure throughout the city of Detroit now. We didn't see it 10 years ago. We now have a velodrome. We now have USA Cycling coming in looking for talent. And I think it's called the Need for Speed. And they're looking for talent for our next Olympians. We got one national champion who was 15 years old in the city of Detroit now. And he's only been cycling for, I want to say, 4 years. So we're doing a great job there. You got DTE, who was really looking to reduce its greenhouse gas by switching from its coal power plants to electric plants. So to green energy, i.e. wind and solar. So we're seeing a change. And so for me, once again, electrification, regional transit has got to be key. Getting more people to use non-motorized transit and see that as an option. Those are key things. And to get more people to see how their homes and how our office buildings, and we just implemented our benchmarking ordinance, where now it is mandatory for buildings above 20,000 square feet to publicize their energy use annually. And so, I mean, if you don't do it, we're not going to give you a ticket, we're not going to fine you, but we will shame you if you don't do it. And so it's done around the country, in larger cities. Chicago's doing it, Ann Arbor's doing it. But for me, I didn't want to punish people monetarily or put anybody in jail, but I did say we will shame you. And shame is an effective tool in certain situations when it comes to compelling compliance. And so those are some of the things that we're looking at and some of the things we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Are there any barriers that are top of your list that need to be removed in order for?
Give me an example. What do you mean by that, Terry?
I don't know. Are there policy things that are slowing people down or getting in the way? Are there regulatory, or what can we do to help remove those barriers so this can happen fast? I mean, obviously you need the resources.
Yeah. So what we're seeing, and I appreciate the Biden administration for doing this, is we're seeing people lean in when it comes to sustainability and electrification. You're seeing grants, you're seeing federal dollars come into play. You're seeing the state start to lean in and give dollars to municipalities for certain items. So when I talk about the electrification, there's $10 million. I think there's about a $25 million pot at the state. And the city of Detroit, we're looking to go get about $10 million of that to support our electrification. You're seeing what's going on at the new Ford Mobility Campus at the old train station. I mean, we got an electric road there now. I mean, so we've got automated vehicles driving around, although they're not allowed to drive without a safety driver in the vehicle. And we're starting our own pilot transit system where we're going to have automated buses, minivans, that'll have a fixed route, and they'll take people from the lower west side of the city over to the lower east side of the city. I think it's about a 10-mile loop, but it's just some of the things that we're working on. So the regulatory piece is get more resources from the federal government into the states, and from the states into the municipalities, because it's going to take federal level dollars. I mean, the thought that a city is going to be able to electrify and put that type of infrastructure in, it's just way too expensive. We just don't have that type of money for something that's so far in the future. I mean, we can barely afford to maintain the buildings that we have now and our current infrastructure, let alone start building new. And so this is where the federal government is really going to have to come in, and the state government can help as well with these grants and other support. So for me, it's really about the governments leaning in. One thing that I am very passionate about also is about access to water. So our water infrastructure is very seasoned. I mean, we've got pipes in the city of Detroit that are over 100 years old. Wintertime, you see water main breaks all the time, but you also see the fact that putting clean water, delivering clean, safe water to someone's home, and then taking it away. And people forget about this part. The storm sewer is a huge system, and taking away water, i.e., gray water from your home or storm water from the streets, is the most costly piece of water. Water is cheap. I can give you 700 gallons for about $1. I mean, that's water is dirt cheap. Now, taking it away is what's expensive, and delivering it is what's very expensive. And so the energy um, systems, so DTE, your electric, gas, they've done a very good job of getting federal support to ensure that people have access to energy. What the water municipalities, private systems have done, they've done a terrible job because they don't have the same support. And so I've been advocating with federal elected officials, congresspersons, and senators for a long time. We need to have what we call a LISWAP, which is a low income sewerage water affordability plan. That's about $3.5 billion. That's about 5 years ago. It's probably close to $4 billion now, which sounds like a lot of money, but in the scheme of things, in the United States, it's not a whole lot of money. But what it does is it helps to refresh your water infrastructure, and it helps to ensure that everybody has access to water, because you got to have access to water. And with the rising costs, you're seeing more and more low-income families who just can't afford it and are doing just dangerous things to ensure that they have access to water. And so that's not what you need. And when people don't have access to water, I mean, you get things like cholera, you get dysentery. I mean, it's just terrible things happen if you don't have access to water. And what people don't realize is that dirty water kills close to 1 million people around the world every year. And so not having clean, safe water, that's not an option. You have to have it. Now, the question and concern is, how do we fund it? And we need to have federal support. And so people will often try to say, well, let's try to fund it from the city coffers. No, we just don't have that type of money. You got to go to the feds to do something like that. They do it for gas, electric. They need to do it for water. And it's a paradigm shift. And we've been working on it for a number of years. And I'll continue to do that. That's also part of sustainability, because our neighborhoods and our families, those who don't have the economic or financial resources, need support. And cities often just don't have the financial resources to rebuild their water infrastructure. I want to say it's like a $50 billion number when we talk about what it would take to rebuild our underwater infrastructure in the city of Detroit. I mean, where's that coming from? So even if you wanted to bond, I mean, over how many centuries would it take for a municipality to pay back $50 billion? And if you've got pipes 100 years old, that means our deferred maintenance there. It's just, so we've got to be thoughtful and lean in when it comes to how we're going to revitalize our infrastructure. And that's another one of the things we need to do. So for me, the federal government plays a key role when it comes to that. The way they build our freeway system, the way they build our bridges, there are certain roles that the federal government needs to play that's just out of the reach of the state, county, or the city.
Yep, absolutely. And if we're, I know that there's controversy, but if you believe that we might see climate migration, migration to our state because of the shifting climate in the rest of the country, that's an argument for federal investment here. But I'm going to remember your phrase, seasoned infrastructure. That's a good one. that's a good way of putting it.
It's well seasoned. Terry's well
seasoned. Well seasoned infrastructure. Well, Scott, we've got clearly we've got a lot of work to do. I so appreciate your vision and your drive and your commitment to this. We need that kind of leadership in this area. And, throughout your remarks, you've talked about the importance of communication. So, maybe you could just leave us with a few thoughts about, if people are listening to this podcast, how can they tune in to keep tabs on what the task force is doing, what their latest work and progress is? Where should they turn for more information about the progress that's being made?
So great question. So number one, join our Facebook page, join our Detroit Green Task Force Facebook page, call my office, go to my webpage for our office, Councilman Scott Benson. go to our Instagram page. This Saturday, we're having our annual green, our annual Earth Day Awards. And so what I found when I took this job was that, and this is before we got the Office of Sustainability, before we got more buy-in from the administration, that the Green Task Force practitioners, no one ever acknowledged the hard work. And being green was never a high income profession. And so one of the main things you can do, and I learned this from the military, is if I can't pay you what the value of what you do, just because the money's not there, what I can do is recognize you in front of your peers. And so that's always very much appreciated. And so we give out awards to a resident in every district, and we give out like the Academy Awards. They give out the long-term person. What do they call that? The person who's been around for a long, long time and doing it for a long time. They get an award as well.
Lifetime achievement.
Here we go, Lifetime Achievement Award. So we have a Green Lifetime Achievement Award. So we do that. And that's going to happen this weekend. Those are some of the things. Just follow us on social media, come to our webpage, and just see what we're doing and how, and come to a Green Task Force meeting. We meet the third Thursday of every month, either virtually or at Michigan State University's Detroit campus. And they've been very supportive over the years as well. And so, Terry, I've been doing this, and I'm typically seen as a face, but without the Green Task Force, without my staff, we wouldn't be where we are today. And I've had my staff who has leaned in and taken this as a role that's also is mission-based. We've got to get Detroit into the space, and we can't be left behind. And just because you're low income doesn't mean you're low quality. And often people will try to equate the two. So for me, my residents in the city of Detroit, low income they might be, they deserve the best as well. And what we're going to do is try to put the best on the table and provide the best resources and the best services to our residents and move our city to be the best that it can be in the United States.
Fabulous. Well, Councilperson Scott Benson, thank you so much for joining us today on the GreenStream. And we can't wait to see what more you're going to accomplish. Thank you.
Tune in, Terry. We're going to keep it moving. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. Appreciate you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Sustainable Business Network Detroit, the GreenStream podcast. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure to follow us on SBN-Detroit.org and stay tuned for more conversations on sustainability from inside and around the city.